But anyway, let's get into our main topic. We are going to talk about Ferrari and Roberto. Obviously, Fred Vasseur, he's in his third season at the helm of Ferrari. After that Constructors' Championship near miss last year, I think everyone was expecting, including the team, 2025 would be a title push on both fronts. Given the season hasn't gone as expected and the fact that Ferrari's gone winless, is it inevitable that this pressure is beginning to ramp up and the knives are very much out for Fred Vasseur in some quarters?
Mates, we know that what is sometimes strong with other teams can get much stronger for Ferrari. This is a characteristic of Ferrari. Ferrari for Italy, especially in Italy, Ferrari is exactly like our Italian team, very close to our Italian football team. Even in football, we are not very lucky at the moment. So, but Ferrari is simply, for everybody in Italy, Ferrari is the national team. That's why the expectation is so high. The expectation was very high at the start of the season. Yes, it was. But why was it? My personal point of view is that after season one and after season two, thanks to the big job done by Fred Vasseur, and I know that I'm talking positively of Vasseur with people who appreciate him. You, Johnny, appreciate him. I mean, for sure, Fred brought something that can help Ferrari, can help in the way of being a little bit less Italian, a little bit less emotive, if I can say, just more constructive, much more less emotional and more methodical. And it paid. It paid for sure. I mean, let's remember that Fred got in and the car was nowhere. The team was nearly nowhere. And then he won the great race in Singapore by the end of the season. But the end of the season was very good, and Ferrari was close like this to the second position in the World Championship. They lost it very, very timely from Mercedes. And the following season, that was last year, they won nearly immediately. I was still there. The big double win in Australia was incredible. Monte Carlo was fantastic. Monza was fantastic. I mean, 5 wins last year. It was ages that Ferrari was not winning 5 races in a season. I mean, the record after Massa Constructor Championship in 2008, if I'm not wrong, it has been 6 races won, I think, in 2016 or 2018, maybe 2018, on Vettel times. So it was a great season. So the expectation was very high. But if I can say something, even without saying it so clearly, because Fred never said it so clearly, but they gave the feeling that everybody could be very positive about. Because, of course, the experience got during the first 2 seasons, the new car, Hamilton getting in. I mean, Hamilton was a superstar. When Hamilton was presented in February in Maranello, the emotion here was very, very close, of very high peaks of emotion that I lived just with Michael Schumacher times, ages ago. So, I mean, Lewis was very expected, and all the pack, of course, was authorizing to be extremely positive about the season. And then the season, I mean, you know it better than me. The season is absolutely disappointing. The season doesn't work. We must say it with the proper words. The car doesn't work. Now it's revealing something as a small steps. In Canada, it was better than before. In Monte Carlo, it was very good because Monte Carlo was the only podium scored by Charles Leclerc on a very clear point. I mean, he had that podium. The podium he got last race before going to Canada, it was a gift because everything happened in Spain. But in Monte Carlo, not. It was very competitive. It was very second. Just McLaren were there. But now the point got to a very, very deep point. Number one, because the big polemic opened on Friday night after Fred words in the press conference and so on. Because yes, there were very big criticism from some Italian media. I think also from some foreign media, not only Italian, but the ones who normally, ritually gives big stress to Ferrari are the Italian one, because Ferrari is Italian, because Ferrari is a local thing. We must never forget that Ferrari is not an English team, is not that international, even if the company is a mega international for their product and brand and everything, and commercial and everything, and the fashion and the boat coming now and so on. But as the team, it is still the team based in Maranello. Maranello is not even a small town. Is a small town close to Modena, which is already a small town. And it is a very local thing. And from this point of view, yes, the attention was very strong, very strong. And the words from Fred were very strong again, because yes, somebody were criticizing him, but the kind of criticism, if I can be really loyal, is okay, what's going on? Why the car is so disappointing? Why the situation is so disappointing? We can accept it, we do accept it, but why is it like that? What is not working? What is wrong on the car? My personal feeling, very personal, and with a lot of respect, Fred is the communication figure for Ferrari, because Ferrari didn't build something of really communication wise. They have a very strong activity as a relationship with the press and so on. But as communication, Fred is the communication of Scuderia. He only is talking, he only is saying things, but it is since last March that at every question, sorry, Fred, what's wrong? The answer is regularly, there is something wrong, but no problem. We are extracting the potential. There is more potential to extract, and so on. Yes, it was accepted. Race 1, race 2, race 3, race 4, race 5. And then Lewis won the short race on race 2 or 3 in China, but it was the only point because the next day they were both disqualified in the long race. And the crisis got bigger and bigger, heavier and heavier. And still, at the question, what is going wrong, Fred kept saying, there is the potential, we must be better in extracting it. But earlier, Leclerc, and then also Lewis, they started to say, and now very heavily say, no more potential to extract, the car is nowhere, the car is nothing, please, let's think to the next year. I mean, the words from Mr. Lewis Hamilton in the past 2 races, especially yesterday after the race, were so heavy, because he also said, I don't know why there are no new things coming from the car. When McLaren is doing, and Williams is doing, and Red Bull is doing, and Mercedes is doing. I mean, Mercedes changing the rear suspension for Canada, changes the car from here to here. And in fact, they won. What about Ferrari? The problem is that there is no answer. There is no answer because Fred is not used to explain things, because he feels that he's not, he doesn't need to explain. It is not his job. It is not his duty. I mean, he doesn't feel in the position when somebody have to explain something, because there is a lot of requests about the real positions. And the real answers have not been given. And in the last 1 month, there was something so controversial between his words and the driver's words, and the situation got very stiff now, very stiff. Then he got very nervous because he got to the point on Friday night to say, with this kind of press, Ferrari will never win. And this makes everybody crazy. I mean, so it is our problem. The problem is coming from the media. The media say, not me, because I am retired, but there are people on the paper, in TV and so on saying, so sorry, is the media responsible for the Ferrari crisis? Come on. So it is a very sticky situation. Then, in this big situation, everybody started asking, is the company still supporting Fred and the Scuderia and the team as they were supporting them 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago? Question mark. And somebody said they are not. And then the big weekend of Le Mans came in. because Ferrari incredibly won for a third year in a row Le Mans, the fourth race out of 4 this season. So incredible job. And yesterday, somebody said Le Mans showed what Ferrari is able to achieve in motorsport when the team is working together. And it was not me saying that. It was Mr. John Elkann. And John Elkann is the defender, the official defender of Fred Vasseur. He's the man who wanted Fred Vasseur. So now the situation is just giving the feeling of being very very divided. There is not feeling of a unity working together, but some divisions. And I really think that Austria, and then especially Silverstone, will play a major role in what can happen in future.
I think what you're saying there is the sort of one main criticism I've had of Fred Vasseur. I think actually all round is doing a very good job. I think it'd be ludicrous to remove him, but John, that sort of constant reiteration of, well, we've got to extract the potential, it's close, etc., etc. You can see why that's perhaps backfiring a little bit, because people are saying that he's not showing how seriously he's taking it. And obviously he is, but that sort of PR side is part of his job. He is the guy who's speaking to the Tifosi.
Yeah, I think this is one of the aspects that's been quite interesting over Ferrari history. Is we had that period with Maurizio Arrivabene, who completely shut the door on the media. No press briefings, no answers on Sunday night, limited access to anybody. So there was an information complete blackout, which doesn't work in Formula One, because journalists are reporting stories, there's information floating around, and if there's no formal explanation of what's happening, people are jumping to assumptions, and the false information fills those gaps. And a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth has got its shoes on. So things get out of control. Modern F1 teams, and I think Mercedes are very, very good at this. You give out, if there's 5 bits of information from a race weekend, you give out 4 bits of information happily that fills the void. Everyone's quite happy. Everything's explained. And if there are bits you don't want explained, you don't have to tell them, because people are happy. They're not trying to chase the 5th, because you've already given them plenty. And I think Ferrari this season has been quite difficult to get any information about. We've not had an official explanation as to what is this core problem with the car. There's plenty of suspicion that it relates to ride height sensitivities, that when they put the fuel in, the car runs lower to the ground, the floor stalling. This is potentially related to the shorter gearbox, implications on suspension and where they pitch the ride height. The solution may or may not be coming for Austria. Fred Vasseur said last night an upgrade is coming before Silverstone, which can only mean Austria. And as Roberto says, it may not get announced. The FIA submissions only force teams to confirm aerodynamic upgrades. And the Mercedes new rear suspension, for example, which is a classic example of them giving out information and keeping other bits secret. Their upgrades for Imola only detail the new front wing, the new front suspension fairings and other bits. They never mentioned the suspension. It was kept pretty much under the radar. It got out eventually. So it'll be interesting to see what Ferrari's approach is when this new suspension comes. Fred Vasseur has given one comment I've seen all season that they're working on something for the new suspension. But I think there is an element of, if you don't explain what's gone wrong and what you're doing to address it, then it looks like you're doing nothing. And I think potentially that can work against you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for controlling that messaging to an extent. Yeah, we do think there's some suspension internals, some rear suspension internals coming fairly soon that could tackle that. And obviously you don't want to just say that'll be the magic bullet that'll fix everything, but equally he's downplayed it. I remember asking Fred a few races ago in the motorhome in one of his post-race things, is that the thing that's limiting you? And he sort of downplayed it straight away. So there's kind of missed opportunities there. But I guess the key question, Roberto, is this purely just media stories that are coming from the Italian media, which is what Fred in that Friday press conference in Montreal tried to cast the blame? Or is it absolutely coming from somewhere? Is it someone in the team? Is it someone from on high actually putting pressure? What's the politics of the reason why this is out there? Can we have a guess at where it's coming from and why?
It's very, very difficult to say yet. If you want to joke about this, we can joke for an hour. If you want to say serious things, My answer is just, I don't know. The feeling is that nothing is as clear as it was 6 months ago. This for sure. The feeling is that a lot of responsibility is coming on Fred's head, but it is mainly because Fred is the only central figure of this. Fred says, it's me, it's me, it's me, it's me. Yesterday said, I cannot have the control on everything. So, I mean, there is some difference about these different positions, you know? And I can tell you one thing. I don't know if John shares it, but if I remember the Binotto times or the Arrivabene times, the media from Italy this year with Fred have been a lot more patient than in the past. It is a question of respect because Fred is much respected. He made the job 2 years ago and 1 year ago, and 1 year ago. He made the job with the same methods, so not being very open. And I mean, he shows that he doesn't love the media very much, especially the Italian media. I'm sure that he thinks that the Italian media is quite a pain for them and for the team and so on. And he doesn't do anything to hide this. He shows that. So everybody was waiting and I mean, I was very much in touch with some friends of the papers in the last weekend, from Gazzetta, from Corriere, and so on. And all of them told me, hey, but we have been incredibly nice and patient with them, always, since March up to here. But now we must ask what's going on. Please give an answer. Please give an answer. Pino Allievi, who is a very old journalist, you know him better than me. I mean, today on his comment on Formula One Passion, he said that, okay, things not always go the best way in the motorsport and so on, but please be clear. I mean, try to be clear, explain where we are, explain what the team misses, explain what the team is going to do. And that this is not happening. I mean, Fred is fantastic sometimes because he's very strong in take control about the feeling, about the situations and so on. But sometimes he really shows that he is simply not wishing to say. And this make people for sure nervous. I mean, I'm not here to say that the media is correct or Fred is correct. Not my point, absolutely. But I feel that something different with the media has to be done. And if it was done, it should be better for the team. Because, of course, the nervosism would be less. Now the nervosism in the team is like this. It's very much. Nobody feels safe. Nobody feels safe. And Fred said that the big responsibility is from the media. With this media, Ferrari will never win. I mean, come on, guys. This is not serious. I cannot understand why he, who is a serious person and he knows how to use words, could say something like this. Everybody was totally surprised about this. The media, many people in Ferrari, I tell you, because I am in touch, and it was a very big thing, very, very big thing. It was like when after Miami, he said, okay, apart from McLaren, who were winning by far, in clean air, we were going on the same pace of Red Bull and Mercedes. If I was there, I was saying, come on, which races that we're talking of? Same pace of Mercedes and Red Bull. No point. Yesterday again. Where was Lewis yesterday? Yes, okay, he crashed the animal and so on, but everything went wrong with him here in Spain and so on. The situation is bad. There is a lot of small details mixing together to make the situation very heavy, but there is no a serious attempt to give explanation, to give reasons, to try to cool down all the situation. I don't know if you share it, but this is really my feeling. After that, if your question is, sorry, Johnny, then I stop immediately. If your question was, is really Fred under attack from the company? No, I don't think so. No, because the company said it's a long plan. It must remain a long plan. Different now to say we are going on a different direction only because we are not winning. But for sure, there is much more attention than before. It is normal. When you win, the company doesn't pay you that attention. They say, thank you very much. When you don't win, of course, there are much more questions to rise. My feeling.
Do you think Fred's stance comes from trying to protect the team? Like he feels a duty to the team. So when he talked on Sunday night, I just asked him to reflect a bit on what he said on Friday and what his stance was. And he talked a lot about his annoyance isn't that people are criticising him, that he says when he signed up for Ferrari, he knew you're in the media spotlight and he would have been stupid not to think it happens. But he kept reiterating that the story of Enrique Balbo last year, where all the stories were that Balbo had been signed, and Diego, their chief aerodynamicist, came to him and said, "What's going on? Have I been replaced?" And I think this was the fuel of Fred's annoyance about the media. And I just wonder things like the Spanish Grand Prix, when both Charles and Lewis were asked to slow down. What we understand was to protect the skid plates because the ride height was potentially wrong. But they're being mysterious about it. They don't want to talk about it. Fred was asked in the press conference what was, just to explain briefly, shut the question down, wasn't interested. And when you have the shutters come down, it just fuels further intrigue and fuels further questions and fuels doubts. But do you think it's coming from a basis of Fred trying to be loyal to the staff and Ferrari over anything out kind of external, those external pressures?
Yes, he's protecting the team.
Yeah.
I'm sure about this. He's loyal to the team, but also the team is loyal to him. And from my very personal point of view, I would be hit by Fred maybe if he was here. But after Spain, it was the problem was clearly coming from the attempt of better protecting the skid. The skid is the problem of Ferrari this year. Do you all share this? Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's related to the ride height issues. Absolutely. They want to run the car as that car obviously performs brilliantly, super low to the ground, but they cannot run it the way they want to run it, especially in high-speed corners. But, this is why this is the seems to be the narrative. But they all dance about this question when you ask them.
If you are risking your skid during the race and you decide, let's do something, what can you do? You cannot work on the car. You cannot work on the suspension. What can you do? Tires. It is so clear. Why to hide it? Why to hide it? We had to save our skid. So we made all what we could. By doing that, the car was much more difficult to drive. That's why Mr. Hamilton said the car is not the same as it was 10 laps ago. It is why not to say? He said, I will not say that. I will not explain that. To me, I am a communication person, as you are. But from the PR side, I would have said to Fred, let's find a place to say it with the less possible details, because people are not idiots. People are not idiots. And sometimes the feeling is that he is hiding things, pretending that you don't even think to a possible reason, because he doesn't say, so the reason is not there. If you hide it, there still is a reason.
And you hide it, it makes it bigger. It actually makes it bigger if you hide it.
My mom, when I was a kid, she was very angry with me sometimes. And when I was denying something, she kept telling me, hey, consider that maybe I believe you now, but if I then discover that you are lying, it is much worse for you. This is a normal thing in life. In Formula One, it is much more. In Formula One in Ferrari, it is even much more because it is Ferrari and so on. So, very humbly, something better should be done from the communication point of view. Then the car is still a mishap, then drivers are having their trouble. Lewis for sure was expecting something more from the team coming in. Lewis didn't expect to be beaten by Leclerc 8-1 at this point, because 8-1, I don't remember in the whole of his career, Lewis beaten by somebody 8-1. Am I wrong? I mean, it is a disaster for him. And I can absolutely understand him when he is nervous. I can absolutely understand him when the team is nervous. But this doesn't excuse, because you should find a way to say people what's going on, at least to say something of what's going on, because you cannot simply hide. You do hide, and people are not idiots and can think themselves. Once again, it is a little slice of the problem of Ferrari. The big slice is that the car is, of course, not giving what was expected from it in the past months.
Yeah, and that's, of course, where all of this comes from. John, I just wanted to ask you about the press conference we've referred to a few times, particularly the Friday one, when Fred was so punchy about the criticism. That was interesting because that was almost the most animated we've seen him in terms of public appearances, in terms of defending the team, criticising the media, etc. So I thought that was very telling that he was so strong, whether it was in defending the team or do you think there was some genuine annoyance there as well from him?
Definitely annoyance. I mean, you knew when he was going to go into the press conference, it was going to be one of those interesting ones to see what is his response going to be, because Fred can act in many, many different ways. He could have laughed the whole thing off because he's
which is his standard approach, actually,
which is he's very, very good and has this amazing knack at laughing things off. So he could have laughed it off and dismissed it completely and killed the story. He could have played the no comment game, just saying it's speculation, I'm not commenting on it. Or do what he did, was he actually spoke about it and was clearly angry and annoyed and frustrated. And, his comments about we can't win, with a media like this were fascinating. I had text messages from Italian journalists saying, just so you know, it's all our fault now that Ferrari aren't winning. So it's clearly stirred something up. But he made reference to that Balbo story, which again he mentioned on Sunday night. So I think he's walking this is just an interesting tightrope, and most teams have to play this. Is that if you ignore the media and don't think they're important to explain things, then you can't complain about anything they write. So you can't have it both ways. You can't be unhappy that things are written if you aren't feeding the correct information or explaining things in the right way. So you've got to basically choose which way you do it, really. You can't not explain things and be very loose and then be upset that the media are not playing to your tune, because especially for a team like Ferrari, where the media coverage is immense, the Italian media, writing stories every single day and in a way that no other team gets this. When we, write stories, potentially Aston Martin will be in our spotlight when they've had a poor start to the season, or, McLaren even, start of 22, difficult times when they've had struggles, we criticise, go after them, or when Red Bull hit trouble, or Mercedes. But I don't think any of that pressure is like when Ferrari isn't achieving success. So I think they are in a unique spot that's hard to cope with and makes Fred's job much harder than anybody else's. But I think he knew that the day he signed the contract to join Ferrari.
It's an interesting situation, isn't it, Roberto? Because one of the great strengths that Fred's had at Ferrari, as far as I see it, is he's come in, he's calmed everything down. He said to everyone, focus on the process, no magical quick fixes, put one foot in front of the other, identify the problems, work through it. When they had that lull last year with the upgrade that provoked porpoising, he kept things calm, and that's worked really well. But it almost seems like that he's focused so much on all of that he's forgotten this other front that's built up on the media side, and maybe he's been a tiny bit tripped up with it, because I think we'll all agree, other than almost the external communications thing, what he's done at Ferrari has been fantastic. Yet he's ended up in this situation where he's almost having to be on the back foot and defend it above and beyond just the fact that they're underachieving. You're going to get criticism for that, but other things as well. And there have been some specific criticisms in some of the media coverage about the way he's been doing things that have come from this.
Ed, I don't know if John remembers it, but last year in Imola was my last full Grand Prix for Ferrari. Then I participated to small parts of it, but my last full Grand Prix was Imola. And I remember, Johnny, that we were talking in the media center that was in the back of the big stands in front of the pits. And I told you, anticipating it, because I had even not yet decided it with Ferrari, but I was so much fed up about the situation that I was happy to escape. And I tell you why. I entered Ferrari and I was not called by Fred. Fred was just in. I was called by somebody else. And as Fred is very strong team manager and so on, but he's also a very suspicious man, he didn't like this position very much because it was not coming from his initiative, but by somebody else's initiative. Just to cut a long story short, I did never have a very good relationship with Fred. Sometimes, as I am old, I'm not 30, I am 10 years older than him. A couple of times I said, Fred, sorry, but my personal feeling is that it should be better to do this than this. And this normally makes him very nervous because he loves saying, I need people to come here and to tell me when I'm wrong so we can discuss. But if you do tell him that it's wrong in some moments, you are killed. I tell you, it's very, very heavy. So, okay, I went out. Just to say that this situation has built up very progressively, even with the media now, even especially with the Italian media. The situation of discomfort between the media and between Fred and the media, because it is very reciprocal, didn't come just this year because the car is not competitive. A lot of things like this happened earlier. I mean, I attended Formula One many years, but just to stay in the most recent one, it is much less difficult to ask some questions to Toto Wolff, to Chris Horner, or to other people like this. To Fred, it can be very, very nasty because it can get very sharp, very nervous, and it is not an easy thing. That's why, to me, the situation for him now is difficult also from that side. When Fred says people are attacking us, people are against us, and so on, this is not true. Nobody's against Ferrari, and nobody is against him. Not at all. Okay, this weekend, now everybody says, come on, you see that from the other side, Ferrari is winning regularly in Le Mans. I mean, winning Le Mans is not a joke. Le Mans is not Formula One, but it is Le Mans. And the team won it 3 times out of 3. And it is an incredible result. So, of course, this is clashing very much about the situation of Ferrari in the moment. But he should understanding it. He should understand it that, and keep it in the most positive and serene way he can. I'm not sure he does, because maybe now he's very much, he feels much heavy because of the technical and sporty situation, and this thing of the media is putting on the top of the cake, and it is too much to suffer from him. Once again, my feeling, and I'm very sorry of that, because I really saw him very nervous in the press conference of Friday night. I never saw him like that in the 2.5 years before. He was absolutely nervous, absolutely emotive in the moment, and so on. So, I mean, he was a little bit over the border in the moment.
It's a very interesting perspective, isn't it, John? Because I think we sort of talk about the way the media responds to Fred Vasseur, and I think maybe that the race we're always a little bit aside from some people, because I've always found Fred very sort of straightforward and easy in that regard, and direct. And I think we think he's sort of the right person for doing the job because of what's been achieved there. You know, it's never smooth progress, is it? You don't always get better or kind of on a linear, nice upward slope. You have these bumps in the road, etc. But clearly, there's some who have difficulties with him. I mean, I guess the thing that people want to know is whether we think there's a credible chance of him being replaced, because that's what's being talked about, isn't it? And talked about the hypercar program boss, whether he could come in, etc. So, and even rumours about Christian Horner, etc. So, John, do you take any of this seriously, or are these just names that are thrown in as part of the general criticism?
I mean, from the outside perspective, knowing where we are, 25 versus 26, what Fred's done, it would be ludicrous to throw him out mid-season, for example, or towards the end of the season and start again with a project based purely on, and I think he even mentioned this it was a press conference in Monaco, that the fundamental problem, which still hasn't been explained, of this car, which may be related to the gearbox being shorter and the suspension kinematics, etc., was all settled by Enrico Cardier, for example, who has left the team. So his signing Loic Serra, when he came in, wants to embark on a different direction, and these things take time. So sure, it's gone wrong, and it's gone wrong under his watch, but the resolution may well be in place when the suspension turns up. It may be a tiny tweak, but as we see with the Mercedes, for example, that they've revised the rear suspension. They had doubts after Imola. Imola was a bad race for them. They weren't sure about it. But the conclusion was there were other setup decisions that made it wrong there. And things have turned around dramatically. So I think with this generation of cars, you're operating in very small windows of performance. And if you can nail the right height and you can nail the perfect downforce level, you get your tyres into the right window, you optimize that Q3 lap, the car starts on the second row of the grid or the front row of the grid, and the Sundays are completely different. And I think they're chasing a car that's very, very sensitive. And I think it's very interesting on Lewis, when I spoke to him in the pen on Saturday, qualified 5th. So it's his best race, best qualifying performance since the Chinese Grand Prix, where Saturday had been great with the car, and Sunday had exposed this right height problem and the balance went adrift. He said Canada was the first weekend for a while where they've actually made steady progress with the car. And the most interesting thing he said was, normally we have FP1, go into FP2, and then the floor stops working or the rear wing stops working, which suggests that as they're pushing the car performance up and you're kind of lowering and saying how low you can do it, where you're counteracting, how aggressive can we go to avoid bouncing and striking the ground and looking after the skid, that it obviously falls into a trap of the floor stalls or the wing stalls. You lose your downforce and then you kind of got to recover. So I think it's a very, very, very sensitive car, which therefore suggests if they can minimize some sensitivities, if the new suspension can give them some freedom and can get them back into the window that this car clearly had on the sprint race in China. So it's not a terrible car. It's a car that they can't operate in a way they want to operate for an entire race weekend. Then maybe the uptick is great. And maybe this is why Fred doesn't want to explain a lot and doesn't want to say a lot, because it may not necessarily be a magic bullet, but it may just be a small step that can make a big difference.
I guess that's the thing, isn't it, Roberto? If we get to a couple of months down the line, Ferrari hits form, starts to win some races, okay, the championship surely has gone by now, but that will change things.
I mean, let's not forget, guys, that something, from my personal feeling, extremely big that Fred Vasseur showed in the past 2 seasons is that both seasons he was working the team to recover very steeply, very strongly, very, very strongly. Last year, in the last part of the season, Ferrari was averagely the quickest car. I mean, they lost the championship by 14 points. Nothing, really nothing. So he was making an incredible job. So maybe something is coming also this year, even if it is too late to compete for the championship, for sure, nearly for sure, because what is it, 198 points difference between Ferrari and McLaren. I mean, unless somebody forbids McLaren to participate to the next races, it's difficult to imagine something like that. But the second position, it is very open for Ferrari this year, very, very open. And it can absolutely happen. In my little, totally useless book, I remember that last season, they said Mr. Carlos Sainz on the 1st of February that he was out of the team because Lewis was coming. And Carlos Sainz in that moment was even better competitive than Leclerc. He was very strong in the last part of 2023. He was winning Singapore. He was extremely precious about the development plans and work with the team. The team absolutely were always underlining that and so on. They put Carlos Sainz outside and everybody thought, wow, what about Carlos and the team this year? Carlos worked fantastically for Ferrari last year. And this was absolutely 101% Fred Vasseur job. He was fantastic in still keeping Carlos Sainz absolutely positive and competitive and strong and loyal to the team, considering that he was dreaming to win the championship with Ferrari and was nearly forced to go to Williams. So incredible job from him. Something this year is different because even the handling, even if the working with the drivers is showing something different. Okay, Leclerc is absolutely fed up because it is his 8th or 7th season with Ferrari, and once again is not able to compete for the championship. Lewis is disappointed because we already said why. Okay, but this situation is totally different. I mean, James Allison, just 1 month ago, talking of his car, he said, we are so uncompetitive that it can be only for setting problems. There is something wrong in the project. Okay? I do feel the same of Ferrari. I don't know what about you, but here everybody feels exactly the same. We would like to hear Fred or somebody in the team saying exactly the same thing. The car was wrong for this and that. Sorry. Now we are trying these ways to find something out. And then somebody said that the big responsibility was of Enrico Cardilla, who left the team exactly 1 year ago. You had 1 year to work on Cardilla's product. Whatever it is, how negative it was maybe, but the drivers were positive about the car during the winter testing, even in Bahrain. You remember that in Bahrain, Ferrari was absolutely the second car behind Mercedes, much better than Red Bull, and fighting a little bit in some situation with just behind McLaren, and then fighting with Mercedes, but Mercedes having big trouble in the very high temperatures. And then something went wrong. Why not to say why? Why not to say what was wrong, what is wrong with the project, what we can do, how and when? It must not be a duty. It should be something that it is absolutely relieving some pressure on the team. But somebody in the team doesn't think as I'm thinking.
It's expectation management, isn't it? I think I've just noticed, Mattia Binotto now is at Audi, and he's just started pushing out messages now that next season is going to be very difficult for Audi. It's going to be some bumpy roads coming in terms of engine power and engine reliabilities. So a lot of the time in Formula One, and again, this is what Mercedes are very, very good at, expectation management. Don't promise wins and titles if you know your car is going to be the 3rd or 4th quickest. Much better to play everything down, say we're massively on the back foot, this is a disaster, and finish 3rd, because then that looks like a victory.
Yes, we must also consider that thinking worldwide, the attention on Mercedes, the attention on McLaren, with the utmost respect, is not the attention that is on Ferrari. I mean, the attention is on Ferrari not only from Italy, but from everywhere. I mean, when I was young and we were criticizing Ferrari because Ferrari kept losing and losing and losing by McLaren and Williams, I'm talking of the 90s, with the first Jean Todt before Schumacher started winning, and with Montezemolo as president. At a Christmas dinner, maybe guys, somebody of you were there, and Montezemolo asked to us, why the hell are you paying that big interest on Ferrari? Right of Williams, right of McLaren, right of somebody else, not only about Ferrari. And he answered, President, nobody's interested in McLaren and Williams. Everybody's interested in Ferrari. I mean, this is a big trap for Ferrari because when things go fine, beautiful. It's a love story. When things don't go fine, of course, this is a big disaster for everybody. But the disaster must be dealt. The disaster must be worked on. And to me, they are not doing the best from this point of view. Once again, total respect. Maybe the problem is much bigger on other areas, and there is a priority thing, not only the attention of the media and so on, but still something could have been less heavy if dealt differently.
Yeah, that's clearly a key part of the problem that Ferrari's had. Right, Roberto, let's just talk a little bit in more detail about the drivers. Charles Leclerc has as you've alluded to, been very critical of the struggles with the car. At times, he's almost contradicted some of the stuff that Fred Vasseur said. Where do you think Leclerc's at? Do you think he's starting to lose faith in this team? There have been some hints that he might start to look for a way out, despite his long-term deal. So how do you see the Leclerc situation?
Wow. Fred yesterday said that he's sure that Charles is not even thinking of leaving Ferrari. I believe him. I really believe him. Charles is a genuine lover of Ferrari. He feels Ferrari as it is his own family. Of course, now he starts, I mean, he's not 23 anymore. Now he's 28 or what, 29, 28. And he's starting seeing that the possibilities are escaping away without a proper possibility to win and with a big question mark on next year. But still, I don't think that he's proposing himself to somebody else, he or Nicholas Todd. I can't feel it. He's so much in love for Ferrari, so much in love. I really don't feel this.
That's where it gets interesting, doesn't it? That, John, you've got Leclerc being quite critical, so he's clearly pushing for something, isn't he, as well? And or does he just perhaps realise that he needs to show to Fosi out there that he's feeling it as well? Maybe that's just the thing that he wants to do, to say, yeah, this is hurting me as well as it's hurting everyone watching.
Yeah, I think it's also racing drivers, don't want to come out of a car where they've qualified 5th, 6th, 7th and say, oh, it's all my fault, I'm not quick enough. They want to make it pretty clear they're doing everything they can. And I think both Lewis and Charles are now in that situation where they both said this is the limit of the car. This is where we are at. We are limited in terms of what we can do. We need that upgrade, even if neither of them are offering many details about upgrades. Charles can sometimes, let slip a little bit about what may or may not be coming, but Lewis is always quite funny because when you ask him, when's the new suspension coming, he brushes it aside and says, I don't know what upgrades they've got planned. I've not tried anything in the simulator. But whether that's true or not, because I'm sure drivers are dialed in and know exactly what they need and what they want from cars and what's coming and what will change the dynamics and everything. But it's clear they are waiting for this change. Whether this suspension is coming for Austria, Fred Vasseur said yesterday there'd be something for Austria, something later on, which may well be the final upgrades of the season. And maybe this will be the thing that just changes it a little bit. If it can allow them to run that car in the window that it's comfortable in, if it can allow them to run the car at ride height that's good for the race, that doesn't wear the skids out, that gives the drivers the ability to push and have performance, that keeps the tyres in the right window, then maybe the tiny tweak can have a big benefit.
Yeah, there's compound gains to be had for that, and that could set them on a very, very positive path. And we have to say Leclerc himself has been driving very, very well this season. But I guess the other question is Lewis Hamilton, isn't it, John? I asked Hamilton after the race how much of your struggles is car, how much is just you not adapting, and he's still putting the pressure on himself and saying, I still need to do more to adapt. So do you think Hamilton coming in has been part of the problem, because it's changed what was a very successful driver lineup for Ferrari, and there's been just this constant narrative of Hamilton struggling to produce what we know he can in that car?
I think what Ferrari lost with Hamilton, although a lot of gains and Lewis is a great driver, but it lost a benchmark of consistency, that it knew where both Charles and Carlos were. They both would kind of give different depths of information and different types of feedback on a car. So if you take one out, you get someone new in who's learning processes, learning how a car drives, how it adapts. Lewis talked even at the weekend, said, I've never in my F1 career driven a car that behaves like the Ferrari does in Montreal, that you're turning into the hairpin and it's just understeer, and it's pushing on. He says he's never known anything like it. So Carlos has been used to this after many years at Ferrari. Carlos is very technically brilliant, understands a lot. Williams are tapping into that. And I still go back to this, the great story when Ferrari was struggling at the start of the ground effect era. At a very, very difficult Spanish Grand Prix, they did a Pirelli tyre test a couple of days later, which Carlos was at, and he just suggested, let's just run this car a slightly different setup characteristic. So it wasn't changed. They weren't changing the setup over the test because that wouldn't be allowed, but it ran it slightly differently. So this isn't what the computer says. This isn't what all the data says. This is where it should be run, because where it should be run is quicker. But run it the way I want to run it that is slower in theory but gives me more confidence, and we'll see what gains it had. And it just unlocked a new direction and an uplift in performance. So I think by losing Carlos, who knows the car, understands the characteristics, understands development directions and everything, they lost that benchmark, which potentially has slowed down the progress this season.
One of the interesting things we saw with those two drivers, Leclerc and Sainz, is that Leclerc, basically, you can put him in the car and you can pretty much drive anything as long as it's not understeery. And he mitigates that understeer problem with the way he brakes, etc. But he's quite happy being chucked into a very stiff car and he'll make it work. Sainz was never quite so happy with that. He wanted it a bit more compliant. And he had reservations, actually, about the development direction that was being taken by Ferrari even before Spain. I'm led to believe he felt that had his feedback been taken on board a little bit more, they maybe could have even avoided going down that cul-de-sac. They didn't need to go that way and then readjust. So that kind of illustrates what he's bringing there. I'm not saying they'd be winning championships if Sainz was still there this year. That's not what we're saying, but it's just the kind of toolkit you've got. But I'm interested to know what you think, Roberto. Has the Hamilton arrival, just in terms of the perspective on the team, changed anything? Has that almost added to the pressure because they've got this great driver underachieving and that just shows that they're struggling even more? Or is it people that, the Italian media thinking, why have you even got Lewis Hamilton now? Great if you'd had him 5-10 years earlier, he's one of the greatest of all time, but have you just got Hamilton in too late? That's probably one of the criticisms that maybe some of the Tifosi have, much as they love the idea of Lewis Hamilton.
For sure, the expectation was extremely high on Lewis, and for sure, so far, the situation has been quite disappointing. And I cannot think that he lost his weight, he's lost his value, his brilliance. I cannot imagine it. I think that he's 40, and when you are 40, you can be still incredibly strong and fast when things are fine. But when you have to struggle, to suffer, to push very hard, and so on, maybe, once again, maybe things are a little bit heavier now than they can be for a driver of 30 or 28 or so. Maybe he's suffering very much because for sure what he's achieving with Ferrari is very far away from what he was expecting to have. And something maybe is happening in Lewis' head. Lewis said, I should change my brain to understand the car. I simply don't understand the car. Then he said, once again, there are so incredible things behind the scenes that if I tell you, but I cannot. Why did you say that? I mean, it was unhappy to say. Why did you say? Now that he just opened a new page when the only thing that Ferrari doesn't need now is to have new question mark pages about. There are so many. And you open a new page saying, if you knew what's behind the scenes in the team, but he cannot talk. I mean, avoid it. Also, Charles could avoid, from my point of view, some big discussion on the radio when he says, okay, why did you call me in? The tires are okay. You don't want to come in to change tires. Don't come in. When somebody said to Senna or even to the young Hamilton, come in to change tire. And they answer, come on, I don't. Because the tires are fine. You remember? And you came in, you changed them. You cannot go on and saying, why did you call me? I mean, the plan B, the plan C. I wanted to go to the plan C, then we are once again doing the plan B. There is a lot of nervosism about, and the situation is very heavy, not only for Fred, but for the drivers, for sure, from the technicians. I mean, I wouldn't be absolutely in Mr. Serra's shoes at the moment, because the question is, the general question is, what is Serra doing? Serra is technical director, and it is very, very difficult. And there is a big question mark about next season, because everybody say that Mercedes engine and Audi engine are much better position than Ferrari one. So there is a lot of weight about everything. That's why, from my absolutely personal point of view, I said, at least from communication side, let's try to do something better. to reduce pressure on the team, not to give more pressure on the team. Now they are doing more pressure to the team. My feeling, once again.
Yeah, that's certainly reflected by some of those media reports and, a consistent message there. Well, I think we've probably dissected Fred Vasseur and Ferrari about as much as we can do, but I think overall still, as team principal, he's doing a good job, but they need to weather this storm, get back on the right track and salvage something from 25 while still getting 2026 right. So this could be a storyline that runs and runs. So thanks very much, Roberto, for your unique insight into Ferrari, and thanks, John, as well. And I think we'll definitely have you on again in the future, Roberto, next time there's a Ferrari crisis to talk about. So that probably won't be too far away, because there's always one around the corner.
Invite me when we have to discuss some Ferrari victories, okay?
Well, if Vasseur's able to do his thing, they will turn it around, and I'm sure there'll be wins to come in the future. So, thanks again. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and stay with us for everything you need to know from the world of Formula One.